The Institute for the Study of Peak States presents the first International Psycho-immunology and Psychobiology Research Symposium. Panel discussion, Getting Breakthroughs into the Mainstream, with Mark Cantwell, Dr. Kirsten Lykkegaard, Daniel Suboski, Matthew Learning, and Shayne McKenzie.
Kirsten, I think that's you.
I actually think that it's you in a sense, because you've been here way longer than I have. I can just see that being in research, it's not been the focus. So to just understand, Mark, are you talking about how mainstream is putting out new things as one thing?
Yes.
And the other, was there two questions in there about what
there
have
is.
we done? What have we done in the Institute to do the same, you could say?
Exactly.
So maybe I can take the first part. It's what's the usual process.
Yes.
And I don't know who to compare to, as we are different in our approach to doing things. You can say if you're a doctor and you develop something in your work, you know, together with other researchers, because most doctors have some research going on in the background. And so you come up with a new method. What you do is that you go through the normal scientific, you can say clinical trial, or depending on what kind of treatment or process it is, it goes either to, the idea is taken up, if it's in the hospital system, this gets sort of initially invented. It gets picked up by universities or collaborations to the industry, so medical industry. And through that is a long process of working through clinical trials and going through FDA and in Europe, the European Medical Agency, to get those studies approved of. It's a long process.
But those studies, I mean, invariably they go through research journals, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, they don't need to be published in medical journals, but because medical doctors and scientists are, you know, needing publications, they usually do.
Right. Okay.
So, but it's the legal requirements for either a drug or it's a device to be used in medical, you know, facilities for surgery, for anything that goes in your body, you can say, needs to go through those tests. So they're legal requirements.
Well, let's drill down. Well, maybe let's just pick.
But you can also pick another topic, like say chiropractors come up with a new way of doing something.
Yeah.
I think the Chiropractical Society has their own guidelines for, you know, if say a practitioner comes up and says this is the best way to get rid of lower back pain, and I've tried this is how you could do it. I'm not sure if that actually, I don't know for sure how they validate that, how they make sure that this does not, you know, cause further problems for their clients, patients. I don't think the same rules apply to that field.
What about psychiatry?
I would not be the right person to talk about that. I think what you mean there is maybe cognitive therapies and stuff, because of course medical, that's the, medicine would be the same route as I described in the first place. That would be the long process it's a 20-year process to develop a drug, from your first ideas of what receptors to target, what this is doing in the body, to approval. It can be up to 20 years.
But yeah, okay. But cognitive therapies would be the most similar to what you're doing.
I actually don't know. I don't know, Jennifer, you're not on the panel, but if you have any inputs to this one, I don't know if, you know, if in the psychological field someone comes up with a new, it's probably validated in trials too, but not clinical trials. I'd assume that you would go through some kind of approval process where you technically test it against something else to see that it and to that disease or the suffering, whatever you're trying to do. So I think in any field you have to get the field that you're in to sort of go, yes, it's now approved of. It's like getting the certificate stamp, that this is now something that everyone says. But this is at the level of, this is not alternative medicine. This is in the approved scientific medical field that we're talking about right now.
Okay.
Maybe you want me to add something to that, Mark?
Please. Yeah, please do.
So firstly, I got a comment from Patricia Shaw saying, isn't really clear exactly what our techniques are. And that's true. This has actually been a research symposium. We actually really wanted to talk around our model and the research we're doing so far and the implications for that. But I think for this discussion, it probably does make sense to just elaborate a little bit around that. So in our trainings, we do teach quite a number of different techniques, but our training is not actually about technique. It's actually about understanding the overall model. And once you understand that overall model, then it allows you to diagnose what's the root cause of the problem that the client has, and therefore select what's the right technique to use. We don't have just one single technique that we use. From a strategy perspective, some of the research and these kind of different types of approaches that are actually more aimed at trying to address the root cause of the problem that someone might have, that probably 2 or 3 decades ago was called power therapies. So in that would have been, I think, TFT. I'm not sure whether EFT was in that at the time. VKD, I think it is. And EMDR might have been in that as well. And from a strategy perspective, EMDR and EFT took very different approaches. So Francine Shapiro with EMDR, she basically said this is only going to be for medical people. So the lay person, general therapists can't get trained in this sort of stuff. And so she built credibility in the more traditional sense. And so it's actually got accepted into the psychology field. So that was a strategy she took, and it's been a very successful strategy. Probably completely the other extreme was EFT. Gary Craig was basically I just want to get this out to the world. Had a free website. You could download the instructions. It's just one simple technique. He kind of leveraged stuff from TFT, thought field therapy, which had a whole range of different sequence that you had to do tapping in. And he just said, let's just make this really, really simple and just get it out to as many people as we can. So that was another approach. And again, lots of people would say, because there's broad awareness of that, at one level, that strategy was successful, but then tapping has become very generalized, and what was the pure EFT approach is now kind of been a bit lost again. So some elements of that strategy have kind of been lost, and certainly there's not necessarily the recognition around with EFT that EMDR actually has. There certainly have been published papers around EFT and the effectiveness of it, but it wouldn't have the same kind of acceptance within the psychology field. Now, one of the things where we have failed, one of the worst strategies you can do is actually be in the middle, not be strongly one way or the other, and that's kind of what we've done, right? So we've got doctors and psychologists who recognise that there are some things that their training have been very effective at doing. So in medicine, very effective when it comes to acute problems, but not particularly helpful with a lot of chronic problems. And so people who have got medically trained people who recognise that failing and were looking for something else. And similar with psychologists as well. But then we've also been, we also want to get, like Gary Craig with EFT, we also want to get this out to as many people as possible. So we also, particularly in the early days, we're much more open to getting this out to just as many people as we can. And so we're kind of not all that clear on our strategy. We're a bit lost in trying to do both at the same time, or at least trying to transition from just get this out to anyone to now much more how do we get this into mainstream and maybe taking a more traditional approach. So that's where our strategy is, I would say, has failed at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, we're not going to build a strategy in the next 60 minutes, right?
Yes.
What we're going to do is we're soliciting ideas to subsequently go through and pore over, and you'll have the raw materials to some degree. it sounds like that everything that you've talked about and Kirsten's talked about already has a built-in audience, right? That there is a group of individuals that have already been established. This political system that's already been established, whether it's drug therapy, like clinical trials in one way, or your reference to EMDR or EFT. There's already a receptive audience for such techniques. Chiropractic was another one, right, where you have an organization that kind of monitors itself. You don't have one like that, do you? You don't have such an entity.
No.
Right. Okay. So that's what makes this different. One of the things that makes this different, and that you have to be aware of. Okay. So, all right, we have a bit of a historical context. Actually, before we leave that, so is there anything else that you tried and where it failed? Right, where you've tried to go out into the mainstream, through journal publications, through conferences, through soliciting direct one-on-one with patients, through soliciting direct one-on-one with therapists. What areas have you actually tried significantly, not just ad hoc, and where it failed?
Do you want to start with conferences, Kirsten, and then I can try talk about universities and associations, and Grant might want to add some stuff as well if he is there as well.
Well, it was actually interesting, the conference that Mary and I attended last year in Toronto about brain injury, the 13th World Congress. There was actually a session about this, about implementing new things, and that was medical things. And the conclusion was it takes 17 years. So that is a new procedure in a setting, in a clinical setting. It could be just, in this COVID times, it could be ventilating people with smaller tidal volume, things that are procedures, and changing those procedures in all clinical settings so that they're standard, that this is how we do it in the medical field. That was interesting. So with regards to, I think my plan of, or my intention of being at the conference was actually to try to see if I could find other university collaborators, hospital doctors, where we could actually go in to have more of instead of just case studies, that we actually set up more like a study where you can say, if you take 50 patients with this range of symptoms, how many do actually respond to this? Because one of the things is that when you offer something, that you're specific about what can we do with it and what can we not do. And that's where, this talk earlier today, Dr. Mary Pellissier had about the traumatic brain injury and all the questions about what symptoms can it help and what can it not do. And to get that nailed down in a paper and published could help tremendously with such a field as TBI. Other fields, which is more maybe psychological, is probably a different approach. So I think that approach was to get more in the medical direction and also get collaborators at university level, which is not the same as essentially as taking an application and getting it out. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that for all applications.
Okay, what I just heard from you is about building relationships. Right?
Yeah, so building relationships that actually sustain and carry the research forward. In other words, we can do what we can do on a case-by-case level, and we can publish case studies. But if you really want to take it to the level of a real study, and then again, I think at some point we should look at the comments, because I saw a comment that, is that really, what you want to do, have a clinical study, or do you want to put it out and saying, this works, and let's just keep working, way offering it. But in that way, it doesn't go mainstream, unless at some point something happens where people all of a sudden go, oh, someone is doing something that actually works. I don't know how long time that takes versus actively, doing something strategic.
But that's you talked about a one-off conference, right? Grant, have there been lots of conferences in the last decade on as you moved forward, or you're strictly basically had your nose to the grindstone doing research?
Want to talk about Tom's?
So we had another colleague, our French-Swiss psychiatrist. He's taken 2 conferences in the last year. And the acceptance of something like silence the voices, the voice process, is, I think there's curiosity, but there is a lot of resistance from the field. And so I don't know how to approach that, and how to we just actually gave it for free. We had flyers there, that could be, from handing out to doctors and other people at the conference, and I think they were distributed, but the results of the getting in contact and actually getting some network in it was not successful.
Okay.
So the field is like very determined to stay with the conclusion that this is a disease of such and such character, instead of looking at what can we do to solve this issue.
Okay.
At the same time, I can understand the reasoning from, they want to see. That was one thing I had of from the conference in Toronto, was that this other doctor who said to me, come back when you have a study. And what I was trying to do there was create context so we could create those.
Right. Studies. Chicken and egg, right?
Yes.
Okay. And of course, you can't get into the journals unless you get that done, and you can't publish that, widely unless you get in the journals and so on. So, yeah, it's a catch-22 situation, I think, is happening, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Maybe Shayne, it's good to kind of now touch base with the comments and to see if there's any.
So let's start with a non-traditional approach. So Claudine has said, have you offered to celebrities who have openly spoken about their health difficulties, health issues you can fix with a specific peak statal process?
Have you done that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And it's a great thing, right? I mean, it's the first thing that comes to my head when if I want to sell something, right? Okay. So great idea. You haven't tried it yet. Okay. So just keep that in the back pocket. What else?
Yeah,
what else?
Okay. So Ed Zerkwitz, using COVID-19, we all see all kinds of testimonies of methods or supplements that kill virus or create community. What is the best filter in those that really work?
So this sounds like a device question. Is it?
No, I think it's more around how would we demonstrate, if we did come up with a treatment for coronavirus, how would we demonstrate that this really worked? Because
okay, right.
What they're saying is, lots of people are out there with testimonies. Well, reality is that's pretty much all our approach has been as well, is a bunch of testimonies, right? We don't have clinical research trials, independent testing. So it is a good question.
And I think also the reason why a lot of people are hesitant, just, when you talk to them and approach with our processes, there's so many things out there that people claim, so you just put in the same category of someone just claiming something. So
exactly.
How do you pull yourself out of that bucket, and show that? And that's where I was, from a research scientific standpoint, says you need to do the same as the world that does that, But at the same time, I even think sometimes that you don't get seen even if you do that.
Right.
Just because what this is so different anyway.
So I think as far as what have we done around that, when Grant established the Institute over 20 years ago, one of the key principles, as Mary touched on in the presentation before your talk, Mark, was around we do pay for results. So you only pay for the treatment if it actually works. If the issue that you said and you agreed up front before the session is actually completely treated as agreed up front. If that's not the case, then you don't actually pay for the treatment. So Grant initially did that just from an ethical perspective, but that's actually one of the ways that we respond to the questions around, so where's your clinical trials? And it's like, well, it's pay for results. If it doesn't work, you don't pay for it. So that's been our strategy up until now.
Right, but that's a double-edged sword too, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're not bringing in a lot of revenue
mm-hmm.
because of it, and because you're not bringing in revenue, you don't have the revenue to conduct these trials in a way. So or bring money to the table to solicit others that have the credibility and the voice to listen to you. So my perspective is everything is on the table, right? If you have a goal, then everything is on the table to figure out how you finesse your ecosystem to put it in play to get to that goal. And you might want to revisit that approach at some point, right? So again, we're just getting ideas down, right? Of what we have to work with. Okay. Any other? I'm seeing 63 comments so far.
Is there really?
I 63 something. Maybe it's people. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be people, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got Antonella saying yesterday she mentioned finding a way to be visible in the media, like getting onto a TV show would obviously generate a lot of attention. Probably the best example of that would be getting on Oprah.
That's right, Dr. Oz.
So I have another comment here about if we just state with the clinical trial or how to do something that is actually the access to more mainstream approval. There's a comment from Celine who was talking about epigenetics yesterday. She says clinical trials for therapy has to be accepted by ethical commissions if we want to be accepted to publish in recognized scientific journals. And that's my experience too. So that's just emphasizing that even if it's a therapy, it needs to have that kind of workflow. Right. And Daniel, who's an MD in Germany, says there are different types of studies. Least complicated is case reports. Bigger ones is the double-blinded studies, I guess is what he means here. It needs a consent from the patient to be included in the study and the acceptance of the ethical commission. The most important thing is a study needs patient. So far, having patient audience appeared to be the biggest problem. I don't know if you know what he means, Shayne, on the last one.
I think it's just around, have we got enough people willing to...
Okay, sorry, is that an impediment to you folks, that you don't have enough people to treat?
Well, that's one thing. If you then have the flow of people, do we have enough people to do the work? So we actually in a situation where we have some techniques that are really, really useful. We don't have maybe the patient or client flow, but we don't have maybe enough people to do it. I don't know what your thoughts on that, Shayne, is.
Yeah, I think it depends on what we're talking about. I think from a general therapy perspective, while the number of therapists globally is still relatively small, I think there's enough capacity there at the moment to deal with some increase in the number of general therapy clients. But when we go to our clinic processes, traumatic brain injury, Asperger's, obsessive compulsive disorder, these kind of, at the moment, we're not getting as much of a client flow for them, but we are in the process of getting more and more people trained up so that we will have capacity for that, because that is our focus at the moment, is to get more client flow in those clinic processes.
Okay, well, with respect to the therapies that you have developed that are successful, are there organizations around those particular ailments?
Yes, and that has been an approach as well.
Okay, so
one of the things that you can say about the voices, now we had conferences last year, but those were not the only ones that we actually sent abstracts for. And there was one abstract which was more of a approach of applying it on the spot. You could get a slot for, I think it was 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or 45 minutes to actually demonstrate something in front of an audience. And we were not picked for that. We were actually rejected. And I would have assumed that a society where this is actually both clinicians as well as patients who come to these conferences, that they would be interested in solving something, that you approach them and say, we have actually something that works.
Well, okay, that was a one-off event, though, right?
Yeah,
No,
but
Let
I
me.
don't think it's Grant's experience from the past.
Yeah, I'll add a few more, and then Grant can elaborate as well. So, the Voices Hearing Association is one where we've got a very successful treatment for voices. We've sent them emails, we've left them voicemail messages, we've sent them free copies of Grant's book, Silence the Voices. No responses at all from them. For traumatic brain injury, probably the biggest traumatic brain injury organisation in the UK is called Headway. I've sent messages, both emails and many LinkedIn messages to people in that organisation. I finally got a personal connection to anyone in the organisation. She really enjoyed what I had to say, but she wasn't the right person to make the decision. I get handed on to someone else. I don't have they don't give me their contact details. They give them mine. Again, I don't hear from them. I keep following up. So I remember when Grant presented at an autism conference, and one of the responses that a practitioner who helps people with autism jokingly said, but there's possibly a bit of truth to it, is like, well, in some ways I hope that you're wrong, because if you actually can completely treat this, then I'm out of a job, right? So that's part of the mindset resistance that we're facing with some of the kind of associations that are or clinics or that could refer us these kind of clients.
Right. Well, okay, two things on that. One is a lot of organizations are just smoke and mirrors, right? They're one guy in a basement who calls himself, the president of the Plastic Surgery Association of America. So you have to understand who you're talking to and whether it's legit.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to have to map the value, the thing of value that you have, and then find those organizations that are legitimate, that are real. Anyway, I had something else to say, but I'll leave it for now. But it doesn't sound like you've done it in a methodical way, right?
That's true. So you're right one of the things that I used to do, I travel around a lot with the roles that I have, particularly as CEO and one of the trainers. And so what I generally would be trying to contact whoever I thought might be worthwhile contacting, a university researcher or an association. And the closest I got that I thought, we're finally going to get a breakthrough was when I was in Cyprus. So I contacted a couple of researchers there. They actually did meet with me. The conversation seemed to go really well. I said, is there a clinic somewhere in Cyprus that treats people with TBI? They said, yes, there's only one in the whole island. They introduced me to that. I got to meet the clinic manager and the lead doctor. Had a conversation with them. They said, this is definitely outside of our paradigm, but if at the end of the day this actually meets the, is going to make a difference to the clients, it sounds great. We offered them a couple of treatments for free to demonstrate the effectiveness of it, and then if that worked, then we could talk about a commercial arrangement. Sent them that in writing. No response. Follow up, no response. And then eventually I finally got a hold of the doctor and he just said, we're really busy at the moment. So I don't know what actually happened internally, that everything seemed to be going so well, and then all of a sudden, unfortunately, there was a block. Now, again, it's just a one-off, but that there's something there that we still need to figure out how we are able to get all the way to the final decision maker in moving forward with something like that.
Right. I've witnessed the similar thing you mentioned earlier about pushback from the organizations that, they're going to be out of a job if your stuff actually works. NASA faced the same issue, right? People had their own solutions to problems that they were pushing, and they wanted those solutions to be the ones that carried the day. And so what they started to do is, I get this change of culture. And so they tried to shift the scientists away from owning the solution to owning the problem. And that's in fact what I need to do with my organization now in the months and year coming up, is try to shift the thinking They're thinking of that they know what they're doing, or that what they've learned in the past is the right solution. They really should own the problem. And so your guys that you were just talking about in Cyprus who said, yeah, we're willing to listen as long as it works. He had the right attitude, but I don't know what happened, why it fell off the table.
Yeah.
But anyway, I suggest that you do this. You take your top treatments, the ones that are the most likely to succeed, and then do a deep dive into finding out who cares about that, what organizations, and that those that can actually bring money to the table, money and patients, and some expertise is one avenue that I would explore. Was there anybody else wanted to mention to get on this topic?
Just want to say that most organizations who are in something has invested something in having that niche. So the translation that you're talking about, it would be great if they owned the problem of solving the issue, but if they're not willing to get rid of the issue, you can't come with something that can get rid of the issue. I mean, that's definitely one hurdle.
Unless you give them an incentive, right? What is the incentive other than the problem itself? What incentive can you offer them?
Have you been successful with there in the crowdsourcing, or that's where I've heard you talk about personal, not fame, but acknowledgement or something, right?
Yeah, they often get, well, sometimes the reward is financial. More often it's bragging rights. NASA would do things like have dinner with an astronaut, or the most successful campaign they ever had to solicit ideas from the 18,000 staff within NASA was, if you solve this problem, you can have a parking space close to your office. So there's all kinds of different incentives, but for the organizations, would the incentive be, you got to think about what will motivate them. This pay for success only kind of approach. Well, maybe there's another ethical way of phrasing that would be more appealing to them. If they knew that there was a source of income there, potential income there for them. I don't know, I'm just spitballing, but you have to appeal to these people who can potentially help you by speaking their language and incentivizing them.
I just want to back you up on that, Mark, because from my perspective in working to create partnership with people, it is so critical to get their perspective and offer them an opportunity that looks like an opportunity to them. Not like, let me show you how you can help me, but let me show you how I can help you, and do the background work, do the research, get to know who it is that I'm speaking to, so I actually know what they're looking for. And I've made this mistake before. I've tried to pitch to health authorities different solutions for patients. And what I failed to realize is that while my solutions would often be good for the patients, they weren't good for the administration. They would cause additional administrative burden, more cost for the administration, because they need to do more for their patients. I was flabbergasted that people who are in a healing profession would choose to not take opportunities that got their patients better results, because it was inconvenient for the administration and would cost more money. That was shocking to me, but it was a big learning moment for me to realize that it's not about what's good for the patients. It's how do I get the decision makers on board? How do I show them that they're going to get value, not that the patients are going to get value?
Exactly. And that's been my experience too. So, like I said, you got to do a deep dive in knowing who you're talking to. And when I wrote this document about 10 years ago, integrated environmental prediction strategy for Environment Canada, which became their number one priority for their 10-year science plan. And nothing like that had ever been written before, where we merged meteorology with climatology, with hydrology, with economics, with biology, and how to make predictive systems. Where the hell was I going with this? I've lost my train of thought, guys. The point is, we need to be able to talk to usurp the status quo, because the individuals who are controlling this have a vested interest in keeping things the same, right?
Exactly. So, and we have not had that focus I would say we are so patient oriented in the sense that we just want to help get rid of that problem.
Well, it's like gravity. You can't deny it's there. You have to work with it, and that's just part of it's an intrinsic part of the problem that you have, that the patient and the administration of that and the politics of that are intricately connected, and you have to look at the entire issue. You can't just try to tease one out and work on it. It won't work, right?
And I would suggest, or at least offer the possibility, that people that are in these political environments have a certain skill set, a certain way of being, and it may not be as available for people who have maybe done a lot of work on themselves, cleaned themselves up, and are quite forthright and straightforward about things, to be able to relate to people in a way that can support them to make really powerful choices for the patients by finding the motivation of the individual decision maker. And I think that suggests that there's an opportunity for some real strategic thinking, as Mark has talked about, around like, who do we reach out to and what do we offer them? How do we get in their world and figure out what they need in order to want to move forward with, you know, dramatic breakthroughs in health?
Would you like another idea to consider, Mark?
Throw it in. Yeah.
Yep. So Nicholas Pasquale has said, what do you think about doing a kind of psycho-immunology personal development congress, including the patient's consent, of course? So a bit like what Dr. Joe Dispenza might do, gets 1,000, 2,000 people looking for health solutions. Does it make sense to take this way of actually trying to get holistic therapies out to mass people?
I pitched this to Grant just the other day. I was using the EFT World Tapping Summit as a model, and I'm not sure that he totally understood what I said, because I'm not suggesting that we use EFT, but what I am suggesting is maybe we get a bunch of ISPS therapists and do something like this, but do it for a week or whatever, offer it for free, and have the ISPS therapists working with people. Now, I know there's some safety issues and there'd have to be a lot of planning around that, but it's something that I think might create a lot more awareness about the Institute, as well as having people have actual experiences of healing with the techniques. Because it's one thing to tell people, hey, these techniques are great, you're going to get an experience and you're going to heal. It's completely different for people to have an authentic internal experience and be able to say to people, yes, I healed X, Y, or Z because I attended this, you know, live streaming global conference or whatever.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that particular idea? Does it resonate with people? Is it practical? I mean, can it be done? Will you attract? Because now you're going to have a social media guru, right? To promote this.
Yes, which we don't have at the moment. It's probably one of the critical resources that we really do need in the organisation. We've got lots and lots of amazing, talented people who, and a lot of the roles that we have in the organisation, the whole research team, all of our executive leadership team, all the support roles in the organisation at the moment are all volunteers until we work out how to make this financially sustainable. But we haven't been able to find a volunteer social media person yet. Okay.
Well, these are great ideas. So, you know, after this discussion, you know, we're going to go back. We're going to tease out all of these ideas, put them up, see, well, is this feasible now? What do we need? What are the barriers? What are the resources we need? So we just want to keep these ideas flowing. Okay.
Yep.
We're not going to solve it today. We're not going to make a decision today about any one of these, but we just need to get them down. Okay.
You know, I think something like today is a good first step in that kind of direction. This is the first time we've done a webinar on this scale. So, yeah, we start with hundreds, and then, you know, as you learn and grow and the word spreads, then we can go for thousands and who knows, tens of thousands, maybe even millions. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, okay. Now we've got a bit of historical context. Let's go back to this idea of this pestle thing, right? Looking at the different chunks of the world. I want to look at it from a social perspective. So the primary impediment that you guys have, and Grant said this right from the start yesterday, is that the techniques that you're using are quite literally unbelievable, right, in the current paradigm of Western medicine. So there's a need to evoke a paradigm shift in worldview, and certainly a shift will need to be It's going to be needed by those who are locked into the current biological, health model, or at least they'll need to be somehow convinced that these new therapies will fall within the current mode of scientific thinking. So how do we get something adopted across the globe that the world has never seen before, right? This is a cultural barrier. This is a social barrier. And I'm naturally lazy, so I always I go into history and say, well, has this been done before?
Mm-hmm.
And Grant, he talked about electromagnetic waves as being a kind of a close analogy. It has some similarities. I think that even this mind-busting innovation idea, from the 1750s or whatever, when it was originally proposed, or the 1800s, is probably an easier sell because of the, it's easily physically repeatable, right, by anyone in the world. It's broad-based across industries. It's an evident source of profit. So while it has some similarities, it also has significant differences. But have you actually gone back and found out how it was actually adopted and accepted by the world? Would acceptance of Freud's psychotherapy be a closer analogy? When he started to propose his theories, how did that get filtered into culture? It'd be interesting to do a literature review on these phenomena and how they became commonly accepted. So, have you investigated these strategies? Have you done a deep dive into what made them work? What made it catch fire?
I wouldn't say that I've done a deep dive, but that's, when I gave that little bit of a summary around EFT and EMDR, that's exactly what I was looking for, is around their incredibly well-known techniques that took very different paths, and I was looking for better understanding around that. I wouldn't say it's a deep dive yet. I was just kind of getting a little bit of an understanding around what their approach was. I haven't done much more than that at the moment.
And naturopathy, right, is another one that it occurred to me. I mean, my ex had me going to naturopaths and, drinking, water for ailments that had been, I don't understand it, but I mean, there I was paying good money to take these remedies, and, millions and millions of people around the world are, they swear by this. How did that become in vogue? How did that become accepted? What else? What other the whole self-improvement industry, which is huge, right? So how do you get your niche into that? That's another area of exploring, as opposed to the dry, methodical 17-year long processes of clinical trials and so forth. That should be on the table.
Yep.
It was interesting. I was talking to a therapist yesterday, a friend of mine. And she was suggesting, one of the ways that drug dealers get their clients hooked is they have a soft drug, right? They have something that appeals, that's part of the package. And I'm wondering whether or not you have something that you can offer. And maybe it's the peak states itself, right? The entryway into everything, all the treatments you have, is through the promise and the potential of peak states. So again, think about what you have to potentially offer and what is the best entry into making people aware that what you have exists, that it's useful, that it's safe, and that it's available.
Yeah, so if I kind of follow on two of those points. So the first one around self-improvement, the personal development field. So probably Tony Robbins is probably the most successful example of that. And a lot of other people have followed his kind of strategy, where it was a bit like the conference idea, which is you get lots and lots of people coming in for free stuff to kind of have a personal experience of it, which a lot of marketing says that's a key thing that you want to do. You want have people to directly experience the product rather than try to understand it conceptually. And that definitely is the case with our work. It's the direct experience that's going to be the biggest thing that will have people change their behavior. So looking at ways for us to do that definitely is something for us to explore. The second one around how do we get them to experience it, experience something, not the best analogy in the world, but I understand the concept around the soft drug to go to the to other types of treatments. I guess I'm not sure we've really done that from a client perspective, but from a student therapist perspective, one of the things we've toyed with at a small level is around having just workshops. So you get just a day or two of experiencing both from a so you have the direct experience around using some of our simplest approaches, but that are also still very, very effective, and getting to see how quickly that works on quite a number of issues in such a short amount of time, as the way to either get exposure to that and potentially become a longer term client, or potentially, if it's therapists coming to that kind of a workshop, actually then seeing how well it works for them, that they can then see that how well it could work for their clients as well, and therefore get trained as well. So we've toyed with that idea, but it's only probably in the last year or so that we've been doing that.
Okay. Let's go to the audience. Is there anything that they've provided?
Yeah, so I guess a different take on getting the visibility. So Joe Rogan reaches millions of listeners and viewers. So what about getting Grant or someone interviewed by Joe Rogan as a way to get that visibility?
That's a great idea. Why not? All right.
Yep.
He's a cool guy. I watch his podcasts all the time.
So Grant has done that type of an interview, but not with someone with that kind of reach. So we're definitely open to that kind of initiative.
But actually, but you got to temper that. So Grant goes on, he does his thing, it's wonderful, and now he's got 60,000 emails in his inbox as a result. All right. Mm-hmm. So it's the so what factor. Okay, so you've let people know, but what's the thing that you actually want? Right? Yes, you want people to know that you exist. Okay, but then subsequently you need to be able to either handle the volume and to treat the people that are coming in as either patients or therapists themselves, right? So how do you bifurcate that, and how do you deal with the volume? Mm-hmm. And are you able to do that? So in other words, you have to think it through. Are you going to shoot yourself in the foot? Yeah. If you're a victim of your own success and you can't deliver. Mm-hmm. So you have to be very clear as what the message is that you want to deliver if you do something like that. In other words, I think it's a great idea. You just have to think it through, right?
I think that's great, Mark. I would not want us to hesitate because we don't necessarily have a plan for 60,000 people coming in. I mean, like currently we have people who are building it, as they fly it here with coronavirus. So, I'm sure we could come up with things if we had that problem. What I like to say is better rich people problems than poor people problems. So I'd rather have 60,000 clients and I need to figure out what to do with than no clients.
Okay, but keep in mind, right? If it's really important about overpromising. You want to build a fire festival, or you want to do it right. So it's a good problem to have, and you're probably overcome. But it's better to be prepared for all eventualities, because you don't want to be in a situation where you've just killed your brand.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree.
Okay, any other comments from the crowd?
So Lucy Barea said, find a way to introduce into prisons.
Right. Well, have you tried that?
No, I don't believe so. I'm not aware of any approach to do that.
Okay, well, that isn't... Okay, I mean, I don't know, but on the surface of it, it is a great humanitarian thing to do. Will that advance your goals of making it widely known and accepted practice when you are going to the part of society that has no voice? Right?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but that's definitely, I agree, that's one of the considerations around that.
Right.
But it's also possibly that because of that, there aren't that many people actually really making a difference in that field. So it actually could be a way to actually get greater visibility because it's not a crowded space, right? So trying to go into something that looks like the personal development space, there is so many people in that space that it's hard to get some kind of brand recognition. Whereas you make a really big difference to the prison community, there's not that many people trying to do that. So you could get some awareness doing that.
What did Mary just say? She just wrote something. I can't see it behind my. I missed that. A throwaway something.
Yeah,
What was it?
I was going to comment on the population that, I mean, you have TBIs, you have various problems in people there, and you need to be careful with techniques like ours that you really know what you're. I mean, that's why we made the pay for result contract, is that when we know what we're doing, we're very successful. And that's how clinical trials work. They have inclusion and exclusion criteria to make sure that the population they're treating is actually what this has been developed for. So just saying that we're successful and we know a lot of things, I mean, you can get really derailed by the enormous amount of other problems that a person can have, you know. So when you're you're treating symptoms, that a symptom can be from various causes. So I think when you put out something and you say you have something that works here, you need to be sure. That's why I was saying with inclusion and exclusion that if you do a trial, say you have 50 TBI clients, from that you can actually start making a bit more statistics about, does it work on people who had a bleed? Does it work on people, you know, so that when you meet a client, you can say, oh, you had that, sorry, we can't help you. And that's to be honest to people, not to give them false hope. And that's what a brand is, that you know what you're doing.
Any other comments, Shayne?
Celine was saying, let's start with the believable and epigenetic reversal after therapy sessions.
I don't even know what that means.
I think you might be referring to Mary's talk. I don't know.
No, I think that's still in here.
Yeah, it was to answer to Mark when he was saying it looks a bit too unbelievable, and it's when I said, okay, let's start with something that is believable and that we can actually do quite simply, and starting to talk about what people can believe. Like, there is the trauma is bringing some epigenetic marks in the DNA. Can we reverse it? And to show that we can reverse it, maybe before to start talking about the model behind that could ask this shift paradigm that is maybe too hard in the first place, at least. And to start with getting results, publishing on that result, starting with clinical results. I'm talking about the psychological part. Huh?
Exactly, Selina, I agree. I think this is one of the entrance to mainstream is through this, because this is a recognized thing, the epigenetic change, and that it relates to PTSD and trauma in general, and exactly. That markers that have been found, and et cetera, et cetera. So we actually have some handles there, and like you're doing with your collaboration, I mean, I think that's one way of getting our fingerprint, or whatever you can say, in the mainstream somehow.
Right. Okay. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like it's the soft drug entry, right? You want to slowly take by the hand people and gradually walk them, through your ideas. But you can't just inundate them. You know, you want to give them pot. You don't want to give them, ecstasy their first time.
I think that's a great analogy. And I think that what we've said before is that's kind of a slow boat to China. It would be years of getting studies published and touring around the country. And I'm just wondering, from the perspective of like what the institute wants to create, or what the community wants to create, if like we can definitely do that direction, but is that where we want to focus our effort? Because what I'm wondering is, what's the outcome we're looking for? If we're looking for like 17 years from now or whatever, there being ISPS practitioners in every hospital, that's great. If that's the goal and we're all satisfied with that, then I think that would be a great way to go. But if there's some either sense of urgency or desire to have different results, then we might have to take it into action.
Okay. Any other comments from the crowd?
Yes, Sylvia Button has said functional medicine doctors would be a good group to draw from. And that's absolutely true. They, like us, are interested in understanding what's the root cause of the problem rather than just addressing the symptoms. And we have a little bit of entry into that. So Dr. Mary Pelletier knows some people in that space. But again, it's like a lot of the things that we've tried, we've kind of dipped in the water, but we haven't kind of gone really strongly in that direction as well. But it is a very good idea. They're probably like-minded in the medical field.
Right. Well, this reminds me, okay, so, Kirsten talked yesterday about the trajectory of typical innovation curves, right? That it starts with early adopters and so it's a potential avenue for exploration is to identify and target such early adopters. So who would be good candidates, right? Would they be leaders in traditional health research? Well, maybe not, because you're not finding you have any traction with them. Celebrities, right? Early adopters. Should you be targeting therapists or should you be targeting patients? And how does one access these people? And sorry, go ahead. Somebody was saying something.
Sorry to interrupt, Mark. What you triggered in me is that a common strategy for other industries, not this one necessarily, is to look for early influencers, people who are already on a path to something. They're already offering something. They've got some kind of a following. We can clearly see their momentum, and then moving into a partnership with them, a joint venture or a relationship where either we may say to somebody who may already have maybe we spoke about a coach earlier, Tony Robbins, for example, may not be the perfect example, but somebody like him who's already on something, on a path with a following, and then offer him training around ISPS work to expand his capacity to offer service to his clients. Now, Tony Robbins may not be perfect because his model's a bit different, but the point being, find these influencers and then support them to be more successful using the tools that we have.
Okay. By the way, the ideas that are coming from the panelists, I mean, I'm trying to make notes as well, but I hope this is being recorded too. So that
it is being recorded, yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's great. And I'm also thinking, organizations, institutions that may be more amenable. For example, I mentioned before naturopathy, right? Is there an entry into the naturopathic organizations where that becomes part of their curricula? I mean, on osteopathy, my osteopath, I think he's God. He has solved so many issues, whereas other health practitioners couldn't. They weren't even on the same page when I, walked in with a back problem or something like that, and he resolved them. And what he did is, so here this is a trusted practitioner. He has his own approach to things, very successful. And then he introduced about 2 years of this box. It was just a black box that scanned your body, and in the course of an hour, it actually showed you where in your body you had problems, including if you have parasites or chemical issues or pathogens, whatever. And then it fixed you. Okay. I mean, again, it's one of these mind-blowing things. It's just a black box to me. I have no idea how it works. He probably doesn't even know how it works. But people are spending $300 and $400 a session to go through this, and it's been brought into the osteopathy world. Have you explored the possibility of bringing your paradigm shifting therapies into existing approaches that are alternative, but are actually quite now present in society?
I wouldn't say that we have. Probably the closest example we've got to that, and it wasn't really at an institute level, it's actually one of our certified therapists is trying to do this, is Lars Morgan in Denmark is actually trying to set up a psychotherapy school. And so a lot of our content from the institute will be part of that curriculum to actually be a qualified psychotherapist. So that's not, you said in the alternative, it's not alternative, but it's the same kind of concept, right? How do we actually, I guess, use the model that's already there? How do we actually integrate into that model that's already there? So we haven't done it with more alternative approaches. That's probably the only one.
There's somebody who popped up there was a naturopath. I saw the question pop up, or a comment.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's Amy Vale. Yes.
I didn't catch the name.
Amy Vale, yeah. So she says, I work with naturopathic doctors, osteopaths primarily.
Then there's another one. Something about he is a naturopath or she is a naturopath.
Oh, okay. Yes, Tabitha. Sorry, yep. So I'm a naturopathic doctor. This is a very core part of my practice. And if you look at German New Medicine, it actually explains very specifically how this works. I also agree with the gentleman who said you must give pot before ecstasy.
Okay. So the example that you gave about this this new group, again, they're still outside of mainstream. So you got these two. I can't. I'm not going to express it that way. You got these two kids are outside, and they want to play together, but they're still outside. You want to get somebody inside the tent and play with them, right?
Yes. Yep. That's
your strategy. And so yeah, what are the currently, like my medical insurance now covers chiropractic, osteopathy, but not naturopaths. But my ex's medical plan covers naturopaths, but not osteopaths. So they're becoming mainstream, right? And so you want to be part of that. You want to be where they're amenable to you, but they're also now becoming mainstream, and you can ride that momentum.
Yep. Yeah, I know Grant would love it if some of us were presenting at lectures at universities as part of one of these kind of programs, right?
So, yeah, okay. Again, so circle that as being a potential in.
Yep.
So there's a comment from Ulla Kramer-Suk. She says, when a solution looks too perfect to be true, it causes even more resistance. And I think we see that over and over. And I think Daniel had a comment, Daniel Seiss from Germany, MD. He says that if you take two therapists sitting in front of a client, one offers cognitive therapy that can help the person cope with the problem, the other offers to take away the root cause. In most instances, that client will choose the cognitive because the other is too scary or something, or it's too unbelievable. I don't know if these two couple. Ulla continues and she says, if you offer information to a lot of people, you might find enough people who have no or low resistance, and then you can try to implement it in those. And that's essentially what we do. I mean, the people who come to us are people who have looked and looked, maybe if they have a chronic issue, or this resonates with them, have read the books or have just heard about it.
Yes, I would say probably our best referral source for our clinic treatments is our students, because once they understand the model and how effective it actually works, then they're more likely to refer us their clinic clients.
I just figured out how to read all the comments here.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. Carol says, bingo, yes, it needs to be part of the curriculum. The issue right now with naturopaths, functional medicine, etc., they make their living off the current modes of treatment, testing, and supplements. Thus, their existence is somewhat threatened by the techniques you use.
Yep.
Well, this brings to mind that you might want to start having a brand, like to create a brand, like, you see on the sides of packages that it was, ethically, this makeup is, wasn't tested on animals, or this is, organic, like organic certified, or, there's certain, and I'm wondering whether you can start the process whereby you're certifying folks in these organizations, in like naturopaths, to be able to bring to the table this, they get certified, but it becomes more fairly well known, right? And some are and some aren't, and it's it appeals to the patients themselves, which gives the naturopaths an incentive to want to do this and to participate, and it gives them a competitive advantage.
Yeah, well, I guess that's where at the moment, I think Grant was hoping pay for results would be that kind of ethical standard in this field, that people go, oh, I actually want to do that because they're pay for results, as opposed to just paying by the hour. But we haven't been successful at that strategy yet.
What is the resistance aligning with so-called alternative medicine? Again, especially if the desire is to assist with the medical healthcare paradigm shift. Is there a resistance? I haven't heard it from this conversation. Is there? No.
I think it depends on who you're talking to. So I think when it's the client, there's generally two kind of categories. So there are many clients who just want their issue solved. I think Grant, when he was talking yesterday, we were talking about no one really cares how electricity works or whatever the example was. They just want it to work. And so there's lots of clients where all they want to know is that this works. And that's probably been our strategy. But it's more, I think, when we talk to more traditional therapists or more in the medical field, where they're actually looking for the clinical evidence. And I think that might be what Alexis is referring to when she's talking about resistance.
Okay, I see. I'm just throwing out ideas here. One of my heroes in the scientific community is a guy named E.O. Wilson. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Originally as a biologist, and he was one of the world's foremost experts on ants. And he invented the sociobiology, the whole discipline of sociobiology, by watching ants. And so he came up, and so he founded this, and then he won the Pulitzer Prize for his books. And then he basically then developed the concept of biodiversity when he wrote the book Island Biogeography. And about 10, 15 years ago, he wrote a book called Consilience, where he claims where he talked about where science is going to advance is not within the disciplines themselves. It's within the interstitial spaces between the disciplines. It's a fascinating book, and he's a professor of emeritus at Harvard still, I think. He's probably about 90 years old. But it's guys like that who are such advanced thinkers that move the stick of scientific thinking, right? He's already invented, like I said, world's expert in one domain, invented 2 new disciplines, and perhaps a third that just hasn't been recognized yet. To get to somebody like that has such respect in the international community, and sit down with them, for me, that would be another avenue, right? Look at people who are quite well respected, even for the work that they've done in the past, and then have them advocate for you.
I would love opportunities like that. So if anyone's got connections, absolutely.
Just call it, you call the guy up,
Mm.
walk into his office. I mean, I know people have done that.
Yeah. So happy to keep trying that approach. I know not quite the same record that he has, but there was someone recommended, someone in Washington State that I talked to, again, Professor Emeritus at Washington University, who she was doing research in suicide, and had a lot of barriers to kind of get her research known and her techniques known. And so I thought she'd be a good person to actually talk to, but contact the university. They don't give you your email number and all this sort of stuff. So yes, I agree. Continue contacting those people. Eventually we'll actually get someone who'll be willing to talk to us.
Let's see, Gaetan wrote, why not ask listeners what would motivate them to join us and deliver our work, as opposed to what would motivate them not to do it? Right, and actually that's an interesting thing, because I kind of remembered what I wanted to talk about when I talked about this integrated environmental prediction thing. Is the key concept that I brought to the table that hadn't existed before with the meteorological community was user needs, right? We never ask people what they want. So an example, meteorologists and researchers in that field and climatologists, they say, okay, we're going to do this prediction, right? This forecast on this particular thing. Could be temperature for farmers or whatever. We know what's best, and we build this thing, and it's called the loading dock approach. We build it, we drop it at the loading dock, and we hope somebody comes by and picks it up. Well, we have a 150-year history of doing this. And what I proposed is that we don't do that anymore. We go out and we ask people not what you want, but rather what it is that you do, okay? And then you see what they do and how they do it, and then you intervene and say, well, this point here, we can save you this is a pain point. We can save you a lot of trouble, and you can completely dismiss this whole part of what you're doing, and we give you something to work with. And so you're introducing new ideas into their existing processes, right? But that only comes through a dialogue of give and take. They have no idea what you have to offer, and you have no idea what they really need, in the sense of how can you intervene in their current processes, unless you sit and talk to them. And this is a thing called co-development. And that was the idea that really caught on in my department, and they really ran with it. And I ended up running the first user needs workshop between those who might need environmental prediction products and services and the scientists that were developing them. So that it's a good point, is you really have to engage with people. I mean, there's a terrific journal article about how they did a compare and contrast between Africa and North America, the United States, basically, where the climatologists were producing forecasts in the US for their population, and forecasters were doing the same thing in Africa. And what the researchers did is they looked at the impact of those forecasts, how they were actually used, and whether there was value. And it turned out that the forecasts that were used in the United States were much better. And it's because the practitioners in the US were actually sitting down with the users and listening to them and producing product that was valuable to them in the way that they needed, without making assumptions of what they needed. Really important point. Good article, a journal article from a guy named Cash. I think his name was Kevin Cash, maybe 12, 15 years ago. And so there'll be analogies in that paper, even though it's a atmosphere related kind of science stuff, to maybe what you're doing. And that's a really good point. What are the processes? Never ask people what you want. You ask them, or what you need. So you got to go in and say, what do you do? And how do you do what you do? And you've got to watch their processes, look very carefully and see where you can intervene and help them.
You got lots of support for that suggestion, Mark. Lots of positive comments around that. So
okay. Julian, perhaps giving people the whole pie to put in their mouth is too much, yes, as opposed to offering them a mouthful or just a slice. Okay. Yes.
Ula's saying in Europe, the universities are looking for topics for master's thesis, so maybe we could propose some support.
Yeah, that's in my notes here too. I did the same thing, or I did the same thing. So some managers in Environment Canada years and years ago seduced me into writing my master's thesis on the subject that they wanted done because it had never been done before. And I, like an idiot, I went and did it. Took a year of my life to write it. So yeah, why can't you find master's students to start carving off parts of this, because they have access to grant funding and professors funding and so forth, and start getting them to test through the traditional approaches like MRI or whatever it is that you folks might come up with that would be helpful. So that's a great idea.
So Sergio said, what if you were to teach at least one therapist in each major city in the world, a fully certified therapist? That probably is the path that we're on. I spend before coronavirus, I spent most of my time on an aeroplane flying all over the world trying to deliver trainings. And we've got a development program at the moment to train future trainers as well. So that one still probably slower than we would like, but that's clearly on our strategy at the moment.
Yeah, training the trainers is where you get your exponential benefits, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
More bang for your buck.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time here. We got about 10 minutes or whatever. And I'm more than happy to continue to listen to folks chime in. One way, what for the next few minutes, what we could do is we could look at, I can ask questions about, well, what's the political environment right now? What's stopping you politically from pursuing this? Well, politically, and I'm only guessing here, politically, you have these fiefdoms that prevent you from pushing, the medical community, the current traditional medical community, very powerful. They're going to shut you out. So you want to be aware of what the politics is. You want to look at what technologies exist that will allow you to promote your ideas. So we talk about social media.
Mm.
Are there any others that, this, can the techniques be used via video? I think Grant mentioned that there's self-help videos, right? So again, looking at the technological aspects of how you can promote your work. Are there any legal issues? Right? Have you incorporated an organization or a trademarked treatments? Is this an avenue that you've pursued?
So from a trademark perspective, we have trademarked peak states. Grant actually coined that term. So we have that, and wholehearted healing. There might be a couple and there's lots of things that we've copyrighted. So some of that is covered. I think one of our challenges now is we originally, Grant originally established the organization. His personal journey in this was around figuring out, he lost beauty weight and how to get beauty weight back. So a lot of the focus in the early days was around peak states of consciousness. So we're called peak states therapy. But now, more recently, there's probably been a lot more focus that Grant didn't know that the trauma healing was actually going to be the solution to, or part of the solution to that. So now in what he discovered there's now a lot of spin-off treatments around trauma therapy. And so there's probably a lot more work we're doing in trauma therapy, but you wouldn't really associate that with peak states therapy. So as far as finding us on the internet for, most effective trauma therapies on the planet, we're not going to really show up given the domain name that we've got and the brand that we're really well known for. And now as we're getting more and more into diseases and hoping to have a lot more treatments around diseases, again, peak states therapy you're not really going to associate diseases. So I think there's a brand question that we need to figure out around whether that's potentially an impediment for us as well.
Hey, Shayne. As you say that, I want to speak to it. Of all the things I've heard in the last almost 90 minutes, and I'm loaded with notes in front of me to bring this all forward into the future. When I think it was Mark spoke about the soft drug perhaps being that the promise of the peak states. I don't know if that applies in this brand conversation. I'm sure it does on some level. I just wanted to share as an individual, as a pretty healthy individual, though I've done 5 or 6 solid years of trauma work on myself and have been surrounded, by that work. The promise of a peak state now may not apply to the general mainstream. It's worth asking, but for me, the promise of a peak state is worth joining something, is worth giving up old habits. It's worth saying yes to something that I don't have a lot of proof around. Maybe that's because I have a lot of peak state experiences that I can latch onto to find enough value in to therefore move through any transformation I need to in my belief system. So I don't know where this lands with everyone's general consensus, but my own opinion is the promise of peak states in a world where alternative health has so much information and the internet is just so maybe clogged with stuff. The promise of peak states, I don't think there's that much of it going on. And I like that it focuses on the top of the mountain. And then once people say, yes, I want to be up there and see the view from up there, then we show them how to go step by step up the hill, head down on the path till they get to the top. So I just wanted to share that.
Is that doable? Right? So
it's not always that it's a peak state that actually brings the happiness to people. And that's in our experience. Grant has tried this. He even writes about it. He's given us a list of peak states. Pick one. People want what they have felt, like you said, Matthew, that's something you relate to. Other times, it's actually because they avoid something that they're suffering with. So what we help them with is figure out the difference with what is actually that will help them forward in life. So I don't think as such the promise of a peak state is I think the improvement of life is maybe more a thing.
But isn't Matthew, forgive me if I'm wrong, Matthew, but isn't he proposing really it's to appeal to the psychology of people to bring them into the tent?
Well,
right?
I think improving from where you are is the working words. I mean, a peak state, yes, for some that's the goal. For others, it's actually a trauma healing, because that's what's keeping them from maybe having a peak state, maybe not. So, I mean, I don't know. This is marketing now, right? Because what it does is bring people to a better level. So maybe
right,
this detail.
right. It's somewhat semantics, but I think what Matthew's saying, I think what he's saying is you create a program, and I don't know whether it was the idea of copyright and the legal aspect that triggered this for you, Matthew, but is to create this this process that they can follow in order to get to various levels and so forth. And psychologically, that appeals to people. I mean, the health and welfare industry, right? The self-help stuff is huge, and it won't go away. And you want to tap into that through your own kind of branding. Is that what you're kind of getting at, Matthew?
Ultimately, on some level, yeah. There's so many ways to look at it or see it. A simple example is like a video game, maybe, or a program. Video games are popular. Online courses, hello, human being. Do you remember a time when it just felt amazing? What if that was possible more than you believe that it is? Here's an outline, here's a course, here's a path that might take you to have more of those experiences in your life. And it's not about being there. It's actually about the journey. And for everybody, it's not about the top of the mountain. Some people just want to, tie their shoes, and that's a good day. So it is about encapsulating where people are at. Like you said, Dr. Kirsten, not everyone wants the top, so to speak. But ultimately, yeah, it's a bit of it's a marketing thought. It's a marketing campaign that can bring the masses who are looking at their computer screens, looking for solutions to their individual journeys and in the time of global, awareness or alertness. That's where I was coming from, which I think you both did kind of nail there, which is a marketing campaign ultimately based on peak states as the icing on the cake.
I should throw in, by the way, to everybody listening, we may not get to your comments and so forth. There's a lot coming in, but please continue to do that, because all of these will be reviewed subsequently. All your comments will be reviewed, and the panelists will think about them and so forth. So keep throwing ideas. Just throw them down. Okay. This session is about ideation. So all the ideas are good, and we want to hear them all. Well, we're at noon, Shayne. I don't know how you want to proceed now.
So I think it's a good time to wrap up this discussion. Thank you very much for facilitating it, and thank you very much to everyone on the call. That, like Mark said, lots of really, really good ideas. We really appreciate it. We're not going to be able to achieve something like the vision and purpose we have for the organisation without a really big team effort. So it's great to have so many people here and so many people keen to help us solve this really challenging problem.
Okay. Back to you. Over to you, Shayne.
Radio. Yes. So.
Thank you for watching. For more information, please visit www.peakstates.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel.